Welcome to the Heavy Golfers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down The Last of Us. It's the calm after the storm, and episode 3 has a lot to unpack from it. Throughout this video we'll be going through the entry and breaking down the Easter eggs and changes from the games. I'll also be giving my review because got some thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as well. I just want to dive straight into the breakdown though, so let's get into The Last of Us.
I know most of their names, and I know where they're from.
Okay, so the episode in itself is basically a massive expansion of a minor segment that we get in the game. Because of that, I have some mixed feelings, but I do actually enjoy where we start off. That was in the aftermath of last week, which was a massive loss across the board. Now the dead infected line the streets of Jackson, and there's also bodies of the Jacksonites on the inside as well. There's just a strong feeling of death and loss. Fires are burning in the area, and this gives the entire location an orange look to it. It's very hellish, and even the opening shot reminded me a lot of the hellish landscapes in Constantine, even down to how the demons look. As you guys know, I also listened to the official podcast when researching my scripts, and they talked about the two things they showed last week. One was the loss to the community, but they also had a loss on a personal level. So we have lots of bodies lining the street, but also get the pain that Tommy's going through personally. We cut to him at the body of his brother and get a lot of focus on his watch. The aftermath of the Horde also likely feels like the aftermath of Joel's attack on the Fireflies. It's unfair, devastating, and no one really got to say goodbye. Just in the same way Joel destroyed a community, Abby and the infected have done the same thing. There's lots of things here that come full circle, and it kind of builds off something from the very first episode. Way back in season 1, Joel went to the radio room and was hoping to hear of his brother. The pair then reunited later in the season. Last week, Tommy went to the radio room as well, and once more they've been brought back together. Except this time he's dead. The watch is also given a lot of focus as well. This is what Sarah fixed for him, and she gave it to Joel on the night of his birthday. On that night, he also had to go and get Tommy out of jail. That was him saving his brother, and unfortunately, his brother couldn't do the same thing. Now this leads into a massive change from the game, as in that it was Tommy who was with Joel on patrol. He was the one who gave away their names, and then Abby carried out the attack. There he blamed himself for it all, and then ended up riding out to Seattle. That's something that doesn't happen here, and I wonder if he's wrestling with his position in the town. Tommy is pretty much the leader of Jackson at this point, and he may even feel like he's abandoning it. I do think it is bad that he doesn't head out though, because I think he probably would have in everything that we've seen, even the one we meet in the show. He of course has a son in this though, and more responsibility, but even then, I feel like he would have gone ahead. I'll talk about that more later on, but it is very important to pay attention to. As for the watch, it's also a symbol of the old world and Sarah. Tommy even says,
"Give Sarah my love."
Now, due to the outbreak and losing his daughter, Joel became completely fixated on surviving. Didn't matter what happened or what he had to do, he just kept pushing forward. Even in terms of Tess, if you play the game, you really see he kept himself at a distance. He didn't allow himself to be attached, and that's why the grief of her death didn't really hit him. At least to me anyway. He just become a soulless machine who was completely intent on surviving. However, Ellie showed him the light. Just like a firefly, she gave him something to follow. Joel would even glance at his watch and remember his daughter at key points in their journey. This was often at a point where he was considering what to do and whether he should help Ellie or just go off on his own. Sod the lass. So the watch itself represents a path of selflessness against all this selfishness. Ellie later comes across his watch in a box at Joel's house, and this is a scene that comes directly from the game, which we'll talk more about in just a bit. Ellie ends up looking at this in the game though, and you can hold it and rotate it in her hands. However, she brushes this to the side just like the show. Ellie ends up picking the gun, which is also what she does in the source material. It shows how she's solely focused on revenge and is brushing to the side Joel's last bit of humanity. Instead, she, just like him, is focused on violence, and his gun of course symbolizes this. It's such a great moment, and it speaks to her whole arc in the episode. I actually wonder if Tommy's going to turn the other cheek as well, and that's why we get him bringing up Sarah here. It would be a big change for the show, but we do know that he doesn't go ahead. We never even get to see his reaction in the game though, and this character moment adds a lot to the show. Kinda felt he also looked under the cover like,
"Look how they mess with my boy."
Now it is possible that this was inspired by a deleted scene, which we do have concept art for, that showed Joel's body being covered, but they cut it from the game. Joel's head has been smashed like the like button, and that face will likely be Tommy's last memory of his brother. He feels a duty to care for him and clean him, and even takes his job away from someone else because it's something he feels he needs to do. We then pull out to see more of the dead, which juxtaposes the moment with the infected corpses. All we have is death and despair, and the last of us that remain must now live in misery. We're going to go into the rest more in just a bit, but firstly just a quick word from our sponsors. Now this video is sponsored by the DC Studios Showcase podcast on Max. Hosted by Frankie Smith and Tyler Coates with comic correspondent Coy Jandro, it's the perfect place to stay up to date with all the latest news on DC. The brand new series drops episodes every other Friday, and it'll keep you up to date with the latest news on movies, comic books, and everything a diehard DC fan needs to know. I was really blown away by the Jim Lee episode, and I definitely think if you're a fan, you need to give that episode a listen. It goes very, very in depth on how the comic industry works in general, and just lots of things behind his work process, and it's just stuff you can apply to your own life. The podcast also has guests like Sean Gunn, Katie Sackhoff, and a ton of people from the world of DC. Superman is of course coming out really soon as well, so they're going to be bringing lots of exclusive updates on the upcoming film. That includes James Gunn discussing all of the film's series, comics, and things that have inspired his take on the movie, and basically everything that's had an impact on Superman in his life. I also love the podcast because they break down the must-read comics as well, and also go over what to look out for. Check out the podcast on the Max YouTube channel using the QR code or link in the description, and listen to DC Studios Showcase on Max. If you want to listen on the go, you can also get the episode wherever you get your podcasts. It's a must listen if you're a fan of comic book movies, comic books in general, or just the people behind the scenes and the industry, and yeah, go check it out. It's definitely worth a listen and definitely worth your time. Huge thank you to them again for sponsoring the video. Now let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Now from here we jump to another new scene with Ellie. While the first half of the opening was filled with death, here we join the wounded at the hospital. It's very akin to what I imagine the aftermath of Joel's rampage at the other hospital would have been like. We know Abby and the gang stayed behind to help the wounded, which is also something going on here. So it's sort of like poetry, they rhyme. What it also helps to show though is that there are some medical people here, so hey, maybe Abby's dad wasn't the last of us. Yay! Ellie's then awakened by Maria, who tries to reassure her things are okay. However, she begins screaming, which sort of reflects Abby. In episode 2, we started with her nightmare and then cut to her waking up at the lodge. There she was fixated on revenge, which is something that Ellie's gonna have as well. I do wonder if it's laying the groundwork for the PTSD, which I'll talk about in the spoilers section. The spoilers section. Heavy spoilers. It's Paul from the spoilers. Ellie has very much woken up in a nightmare though. It's possible that this moment also came from the game's deleted scenes as well, as we have concept art of Ellie screaming and Dina holding her back. I think what we're really starting to see though are the cycles of violence perpetuating out from this. Neither Abby or Ellie properly got to say goodbye, and both were robbed of that father figure. Last week, Ellie even remarked to Jesse that they'd sorted out their issues and were back to being Joel and Ellie. In the game, you heard they even planned to watch Curtis and Viper, which is what Sarah and Joel were going to watch before she died. Gets name dropped a lot in this episode as well when they're doing the quotes later on, and it's clear that Ellie holds that movie in very high regards. Is it good though? Not from what we know of it, but you know, it was a bonding experience with Joel, so she sees it as being great. These scenes are all very different to the game though, and there you just cut to Ellie sat on her bed. Tommy then arrives with a box of food from Maria, which Ellie says that's not going to stop them. The pair then talk it out in a conversation that's kind of laced throughout the episode.
If it were you or me, Joel would be halfway to Seattle already.
If it had been you, Joel would be halfway to Seattle before the sun came up.
Give me a day to talk to Maria.
But if we're going to put a posse together, we got to do it right, which means taking it to Maria.
Tommy asks for just one extra day, and that will give him time to get things together. Now though, you don't get a specific nod to how much time has been between this and Joel's death in the game, you can kind of tell from the bruises. Due to Ellie and Tommy still being beaten up, it's obvious that this happened pretty recently. The show doesn't do that though, and instead we get a 3-month time jump. In between that though is the title sequence. Though it's pretty much the same, they do one little difference at the end. Whereas it eventually formed to 2 figures, here we can see that it's just one. It highlights how Ellie's now alone and is a great touch for the opening. However, there is the feeling of hope in the air. Rejoining Jackson, spring seems to be upon us. This is obviously a time of rebirth and hope, and we see as the city's rebuilding. Tommy was a carpenter before the outbreak, and I do wonder if he helped to teach the workers here. We also see as Jesse takes over hammering in the post, which could highlight what they plan for him in the future. There is a line where they say he's being set up to take over Tommy, and symbolically, he seems to be doing that. And yeah, gamers, you know what's coming. Once again though, I feel like this also reflects Joel in season 1. After Sarah's death, we cut to him working as well. There'd been time jumps in both sections, though Joel's was obviously a lot longer. However, I do think it was framed like this for a reason, and to show how the job's taking their mind off it. To be honest though, I was still kind of shocked Tommy didn't go, which I'll keep saying throughout the episode. In the game, he said he'd be leaving Jackson vulnerable, but it's been like 3 months since then. Personally, I feel like that handled it better, and he didn't really spend much time at Jackson. It was just like, Joel's dead, let's get up and go and get on with the plot. It really kept up that urgency, and when you're making a game, you obviously have a big thing about keeping players interested. And just the rage, you know, the rage is still there, and you just want to head out and go get revenge. Here though, they spend way more time, and I don't know, in a 7-episode season, I think they could have cut all this and just got straight to the point. But yeah, if you disagree, let me know, because I understand shows work differently. One thing the extra time allows, though, is for us to see Ellie's recovery. Given a clean bill of health by a doctor, she then has to see Gail. There's definitely a mirror of the scene with Joel, and she's clearly prying about Eugene. She's just using a different tactic with her, though. Ellie is also clearly putting on a brave face and just lying through it. She wants to get out so she can get her revenge, but she has to pretend things are fine. It's sort of like a parole meeting. Ellie also talks about how she should have spoken to him at the porch. I personally believe that she did, and this is why she told Jesse things were fine now. Somehow, the guitar also returned at Ellie's house, and Joel was the last one to have it, which we saw on the porch. If you know the game, then you'll know the pair did have a conversation there, and though it might not be in the show, I feel like they included it. Might just be shown in flashbacks though, but yeah, that's kind of what I think they're doing. I know Bella also gets a lot of crap for her performance, and at points it does feel justified, but I think her portrayal at this point is really strong. She's clearly smiling through it and just acting dumb.
I guess I'll have to let myself off the hook for that.
I feel like Ellie is aware of what happened and that she has figured it out. She just can't betray Joel by telling others what happened. Heading out, we then see her doing her best Patrick Bateman walk. It's at this point that we cut to Joel's mailbox, which comes directly from the game. This is along with the shrine, which the both of which you walk past as you head to the house. This gives us a close-up, and we actually see thank you letters and so on. Thank you for killing those people. Joel had really turned his life around though, and he'd become a pillar of the community. He was clearly well loved and had turned his life around. However, he has done horrendous things, and it really asks if people should pay for something in their past if they've clearly changed and grown, which, yeah, you probably should still, you know, actions should have consequences. But this actually reorders a big part of the game and has things happening differently. Joel was actually buried in Jackson, and you cut to Ellie visiting his grave. This was the day after the talk with Tommy, and you learned that he'd fled with a horse. Since then, Maria had locked up the stables, and thus Ellie and Dina would have trouble getting out. So we do get that, and it's at this point that Dina says, "You go, I go," which I'm sure was in one of the trailers. Or in this episode, it's all a blur. In addition to this, we also hear that she's left a backpack at the gate, so it doesn't arouse suspicion. We also see from the game that Joel lives on Rancher Street. Inside his house is full of pictures of horses, which is also something they brought into the show. We then see Ellie going into her old room and can catch a horse made out of wood. We later see on the woodwork bench that Joel has a hobby of making them. In the room is also a picture of an astronaut along with a picture of the planets. We also have a brown hat, with these items possibly coming from the museum. That's something Ellie and Joel went to in between the events of part 1 and part 2, and this is because he wanted to do something nice for her birthday. They also had an astronaut landing pod. Is that what they're called? But yeah, that's what the astronaut stuff's for. landing pods. You also put a hat on a dinosaur, which that hat seems to be. Above her bed we also have images of Moth, which have become Ellie's symbol. Along with this we have a poster for Nirvana. Nirvana played a crucial role in the Seattle grunge scene, and that's where Ellie's gonna head to next. You also have the fact Kurt Cobain wore Converse, which is something that Ellie dons. It also looks like they have writing on them, and Kurt Cobain was known for writing on his shoes. She then goes to see Joel's workbench along with his carvings. These include a horse one under a picture of a horse and also an owl and a duck. In the game, you have a notepad with a sketch of an owl that has lyrics from future days. That's pretty much Joel and Ellie's song, so I wondered if this was a nod to that. That sketch also appears on a coffee cup, and we'll talk about coffee beans later on. In the game, he's also making guitars and possibly even doing one for either himself or Ellie. Ellie is here without Dina, whereas in the game she followed her in. Ellie then went upstairs and you could go to the box in his bed, which is recaptured perfectly here. That's along with the moment between her and his jacket. In the game, you also had his backpack, which you donned throughout part 1. The scene is pretty gut-wrenching though, and it shows she's not really holding it together. In the game, Dina then calls her down and she finds Maria at the table. That's a similar thing to what happens here, except for it's just Dina and Ellie. Replaying it, it made me realize how much Maria looks like Gale. I don't know if that casting was intentional, but it's something that hit me when I was going back through the game. With her, she's got a letter from Tommy saying he has to bring the people to justice. It says he knows Ellie's gonna follow him, but Maria has to stop it. She's annoyed though because he's gonna get himself killed and knows that Ellie and co are gonna go anyway. So she lets them and gives the pair a horse and says basically, bring back my husband. With Tommy not doing that though, Maria isn't there to ask them. And I also wondered if because, you know, the people he kills in the game, they aren't in the show. One's like Nick, he's not present, which may be why they changed things. For the show, Dina's a lot more invested though because Joel was like a father to her as well.
I loved him too, you know.
That relationship wasn't in the game and the pair are a lot closer here. She even gave away his name and was the reason Joel didn't go back to Jackson for the ambush. So potentially she blames herself. She also made Ellie cookies, which kind of plays off the food Tommy brought her in the game. The conversation here is kind of a merge of Tommy talking to Ellie and Maria then talking to the pair. Dina lied and said she didn't notice anything that gave away the group, but here they talk about the patches. And Salt Lake. In the game, it was kind of ambiguous and you didn't know if they were there. However, Dina's kept this for a couple of reasons. The first is so the town can rebuild because no one would ever head out while it was still pretty much destroyed. The second is so Abby's group can get to where they're going. As we later see, people like Manny are stationed about. Dina was also told not to upset Ellie. She'd be straight on the attack and she just wasn't strong enough to do it. They then go through the names and also talk about the WLF patch, which would look great on a t-shirt that. Luckily, we've just launched our Wolves inspired shirt which has Ellie's blade in it. We also have a double-sided version that comes along with a skull and golf clubs on the front. You know what that means, mate. This is alongside our 2 other designs which are inspired by the clickers in the series. We're running 2 big deals right now, and if you pick up 2 you get 15% off. If you pick up 3, that's our super spreader deal which will give you 20% off your total. All helps videos like this get made, and huge thank you to everyone who's bought one. You look fantastic in both of those for 15% off. 20% if you buy the Wolves shirt as well. Now all that Ellie wants is Abby.
Abby.
Dina also brings up Eugene and what happened when he was a Firefly. They eventually broke off into smaller factions and joined with other groups. The Wolves was one of these, who are seen as a relatively small outfit. Led by Isaac, they're the one who Abby and co mentioned in episode 1. In the game, there's a lot more doubt and the worry they might have even stole the backpack and patches. Here though, they're a lot more set on that being where they are. Cutting to Tommy, we see a farm with livestock and also a greenhouse, which all keeps the town livable. We also get the
If it had been you, Joel would be halfway to Seattle before the sun came up.
which comes from that cutscene before. Tommy changes the trajectory of this conversation in the show though. He says he'd be halfway to save his life, not to get revenge. Again, it's a change I don't really like, and I do hope that Tommy comes back into it. For the moment though, he's basically a pacifist who wants to hold a council meeting. We also hear that they buried the dead 10 miles south of town. I just don't think there's room in Jackson for a graveyard, however, I also think there's symbolism to it. Everyone's lost so much that they don't tend to get caught up in their feelings. Joel quickly moved on from Tess, and even Jesse got over Dina really fast. So visiting graves and stuff, it would just bring back pain, and maybe it's best to keep it out the way. Now though we've heard a lot about the WLF, one group we haven't heard about is the Seraphites. Joining them on the Seattle Trail, we then see them moving through the woods. This has squirrels and stuff on the path which is just like the game. Scrubbed through 5 videos and couldn't get a clip, so I had to go back and get my own. That's your boy playing there. Shabao, we did it. I'm a gamer. Anyway, here we join the Seraphites, or as they're nicknamed, the Scars. That whistling still haunts my nightmares, and that's what they used to communicate within the game. You'd often just be moving through the woods and then would hear it, which just sent a shiver down your spine. You'd have to duck out the way or hide because you never really knew what they were planning. Wolf of Thorns actually did a massive video on the game, and they decoded what all their whistles mean.
When scars are spread out in a patrol, you will often hear a call go out like this. If the whistle isn't answered, the scars will go into high alert, which you can see here.
It's gone quiet. Keep eyes for stragglers.
So it's nice they kind of brought something similar over here. The dad asks his daughter to translate and even talks about getting her to do it. This father and daughter relationship is of course very similar to what Ellie and Joel have. There's even the darker side to it as well, as she would have been given the scars likely by him. These Glasgow smiles are a big part of the group's marking along with their clothing. In case you don't know, they were led by a prophet who taught them to become one with nature. Living on the basics, they're anti-technology and have gone back to simpler times. Even the infected are things that they call demons. Their prophet was killed and thus they're embroiled in a war with the wolves. This was at what became Martyr's Gate, and it broke a truce held by the two sides. This has led to nothing but bloodshed, and even kids have been pulled into the war. It's very much a cycle of violence which you don't even really know when it started. Who shot first, all that isn't something that people know. They just know they're at war and constantly trying to outdo the other. It's something that Ellie and Abby could potentially fall into as well, with either side trying to get revenge. In the end though, kids are dragged into it and it leads to a very, very dark scene. We hear this one's called Constance, which is sort of a nod to the game. There was an elder Seraphite called Constance who was mentioned in a note, so it might be a nod to that. Given a hammer, she then says she feels safer, but then the attack breaks out. Hammers appear a lot with the scars, and you even get hulking bad guys who carry massive ones. Her father says it will keep her distant from war, but we know that isn't the case. The caravan then breaks apart, and it reflects the caravan of soldiers at the end. Now in the game, we never really hear of the day-to-day with the scars, so I'm guessing that the series will give us some perspective. That's what the story is all about, and it's not here to tell us right or wrong. Everyone has their own point of view, and there's not really any heroes or villains. They're just survivors. You only ever really fought with the scars in the game, beyond a select few, so it's nice to get these moments, even though they're kind of depressing. Ellie and Dina find them dead at the end, and we see they were pretty much killed in this spot. It also highlights the hypocrisy of the militia. Last week, Abby said that they have a rule that they don't hurt people who can't defend themselves.
Our commander trained us to follow a code. We don't kill people that can't defend themselves.
Abby ended up breaking that rule, and it's clear the group have here as well. Though the little girl had a hammer, she wouldn't have really posed a threat. They still killed her though, and it shows how ugly that war is. The child wasn't on the front line and just fell victim to the conflict they'd been forced into by the higher ups. It's also great at showing how scared the scars are of the wolves and what Ellie's walking into, which is who we cut to next. Hitting a punching bag like the subscribe button, we see some things in her room. This includes a poster for The Matrix, which came out in 1999. The outbreak happened just before the sequels, I think, but if you want to know what happens, break down on the channel now, Ellie. We also have the White Stripes album as well, and Creep by Radiohead. Ellie is trying to keep her cool, but it's obvious she's losing it. We also hear Jesse's on the council as well. Kinda builds off what I was talking about with Tommy, and then segues into the meeting. These are all new scenes for the show, and like I said, they just headed out there. Ellie's fuming that Jesse's still undecided though, and it leads to her heading out. Jesse gets her to organize her thoughts because he knows no one will vote for angry. But they don't vote for niceness anyway. We then see a list of names with Ellie's last. I did wonder if Maria did it like that because that's going to be the most passionate plea, but then noticed all the handwritings are different. So this wasn't done deliberately unless Ellie lined up last. You might notice Seth's name's not on there as well. However, the other people that speak are indeed on the list. The meeting is pretty boring though, and Scott is boring on about Korn, about when everyone just wants to talk about the attack mate. He's called Boring Scott in the credits probably. Just boring. The council also looks very different as well, as there were probably a fair few killed in the attack. I think the 3 on the left were in episode 1, but Jesse's been added as well, so yeah, lots of people probably died in the attack. Rachel also says it's far too soon for people to head into death, and she even has a kid. She talks about how she lost her sister, and I did wonder if that was her child or her sister's. She doesn't want to risk anyone else's life though, and would prefer people guard what they have. That means not sending 16 out and keeping them on the wall. Carlisle also wants to forgive as well. It's all kind of different walks of life, including Seth, who clearly wants revenge. He's old school. He wants to kick ass and eat bigot sandwiches. Sweet, sweet bigot sandwiches. Awoo! Basically, it's summing up the themes of the game, some of the debates people have had, and also the arguments on perspective. Ellie frames the revenge as justice, as opposed to blind rage and simple revenge. She says that if any of them die, they can count on her to get justice. Even mocks the New Year's Eve party a bit by saying that's not what's holding this whole thing together. It kind of speaks into the idea of community and what that really means. It's something that was brought up on the official podcast, and there they talked about why the humans lost. The infected just work together better. They are a community that puts everything to the side for the greater good. That's why they now run the earth and humans have to hide in little corners. They're just a better collective. In the end, the group choose not to go and instead vote for a monorail. As they leave, I did get a lot of sadness from Tommy. Like, these are the people he's helped and protected and led, and they won't even get justice for his brother. Everyone's just happy in their comfort though, which is exemplified by Gail. Cutting to her watching the game, she brings up how she had Tigers season tickets, which could hint she's from Detroit. The numbers are all drawn on the kids' shirts as well because obviously they don't have a printing press. Gail calls Ellie a liar and likely also knows she's holding the truth about Eugene. I do wonder if his death is what made her an alcoholic. Ellie's entire life in Jackson is also based around a lie. She's hiding her immunity and has even tattooed over her bite. So even somewhere she could be safe, she's outcast herself at Joel's garage to keep parts of her secret. Like, I doubt she'd even tell Gail, who's supposed to keep everybody's stuff secret. Gail then says Ellie's on a path of her own. In season 1, she seemed pretty interested or intrigued by violence and hurting people, so Gail thinks Ellie's a lost cause. Tommy doesn't want her going down the same path that Joel did though. He justified everything he did, even the worst of it. Sure, some stuff like saving Ellie, you can see the reason behind, but there were ambushes and messed up things that we know he took part in. Gail instead sees them walking side by side though, rather than him leading her. We don't know if Ellie knows about what Joel did yet though, but I do think it's kind of obvious. However, due to not knowing how he may or may not have impacted her is currently unknown, but she does want vengeance. Cutting to working at the weapons bench, we see some stuff from the game. This includes the bench itself, her early rifle, and also her shirt. Inviting Dina in, Dina pulls out a map that comes directly from the source material. In that, Ellie discovers it on the way to Seattle and it helps with the navigation. On it, there's lots of landmarks that play a big part throughout the game. Firstly, there's the Space Needle, which we see Manny located in later as the sniper. We also have some stuff I'll talk about in the spoiler section. This includes the Ferris wheel, the aquarium attached to it, the radio station, and lastly the stadium. The map also flips over to reveal a big section of the game that the characters in the show sort of head towards. It shows how much Dina is prepared though, whereas Ellie just wants to show up with lots of guns. Dina is the smart one though.
Travel light but smart.
It's way more realistic than the game, where they just kind of showed up and hoped for the best. They're also only taking one horse, just like the game. That is Shimmer. Also, turns out some people have been sympathetic to the cause, and they're the ones who've given them equipment. Dina also says she could have asked, which is a line Jesse has later in the game.
Yeah, you could have just asked.
I would have come, if you told me you were leaving.
Calling him Captain Wyoming, she's mocking how uptight he is on rules. Heading out, they then meet Seth. Giving her a legit rifle, it looks like the upgraded one you get in the game. Ellie also has a long gun pouch, which is an upgrade you discover. Seth also has a bad leg as well, which is an affliction a character later has that stops them from doing something. In this spoiler section, we'll talk about it. He says he caught some friendly fire on New Year's in a reference to Joel, however, I do wonder if that's what also happened to his leg. Looking at what we get in the scene, I do wonder if he was an Iraq war vet that might have been a sniper. So far, they haven't really clarified his past, but that would make sense to me based off what we get here and the time the outbreak happened. His want for them to get justice could also represent his reaction to 9/11, which is shared by a lot of Americans. Again, I might be reaching with that, just thought it was worth bringing up at least, but let me know below, and I do think we're going to discover more about the characters as we go on. In certain 9/11 analysis, I'm sorry, moving on. I feel like something else we should focus on is Ellie's reaction as well. She's clearly not willing to forgive the slur, and even after the apology, is basically still busting his balls. So kinda plays into how Ellie can't forgive anything, and that's why she's going on this insane mission. The scene actually makes Seth look a lot better, I think, because he got punched by Joel and still wants his killers dead, even giving them his gun for a worse one. He's clearly trying to make up to them, and it's the Seth of us, release the Seth of us. Again though, it kind of plays into the morally grey thing that we have with the characters, especially the older ones. Joel of course exemplified that, and like Seth, he did bad things but was also capable of doing good, which is just humans in general. These secret gates are also something we saw in the first game when Joel and Tess were at the Fedra camp. They used them to sneak out on supply runs and would have them dotted about the city. Cutting to the grave scene, this is framed much like a western. It reminded me of things like Unforgiven, and color-wise, it kind of plays off the orange from the start. The music they use here is also exactly the same as in the game. His grave says beloved brother and father, and it also looks like it has the year 2029 on it. Sprinkling some coffee beans out, this is of course something that Joel loved.
Wasn't Joel all about coffee?
Kidding me? He'd trade half his stuff for a bag of beans.
I never got it. It tastes like burnt shit.
Thank you. Quiet taste my ass.
Which was actually a line, the burn shit one, that was a line they gave Ellie in Season 1. Anyway, in the game, you just jump straight to Seattle. Here though, we see as they travel across the wilderness. It allows for them to bond, James Bond, and basically play games like naming the bands. James Bond. They stop at P, which Ellie could have said Pearl Jam for. Joel never played her Future Days in the show though, so maybe that's why she doesn't know them. And they also hadn't invented that song yet, but I know on the podcast they were like, we don't care, we've changed the time and we don't care, the song's still important. We haven't heard it yet though, but if she knows Nirvana, she should at least know Pearl Jam. Either way, it leads into them talking about the first person Ellie killed, which is a scene pulled directly from the game.
Hunter was on top of him, drowning him, and...
In Kansas City, you got jumped by this kid, maybe just a couple years older than me.
I just ran in there, grabbed his gun, and shot the guy in the face.
And I came up behind him, raised my gun, and, yeah.
Ellie won't tell the first person she killed though, because that was Riley. Hitching up a tent, we then see as they settle for the night. It's kind of like the campfire scenes from last season, which were mainly pulled from deleted scenes. So I did wonder if this was one as well, but I couldn't find any concept art for it. However, what they do is rework some stuff from the game. I know last week there were complaints that they skipped over the smoking scene because that let Ellie and Dina get closer. But they do shift it to here. Well, not the smoking, but the conversation. Basically in the game though, they found Eugene's stash like Ellie and Jesse did. The pair then smoked and ended up kissing.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay, but I have a stupid question.
Scale of 1 to 10.
Scale of 1 to 10.
No, I give it a 6.
Okay, fine, 6.
In the game, they were kissing, and Jessica basically ran in and caught them. He berated them because they were supposed to be on patrol, and then Joel ended up dying. So they definitely carried a lot of guilt, and that's kind of why I felt Dina went with Ellie in the first place. Here though, it's clear she's been a bit busier in the 3 months. Find out that she did indeed go back to Jesse, and I'll talk about what this leads to later on. But it's important, but it's for the spoiler section. Dina does tell Ellie that she wasn't that high though, and kinda hints to them maybe being feelings there. However, I feel like they're teasing more of the love triangle, whereas the games just had her and Jesse over. Like over, and it was just all Dina and Ellie. Now at this point we cut to Seattle Day 1, which plays things different different than in the game. There, they didn't know who killed Joel and started to rattle off theories.
What about those crazy cannibals you said you and Joel ran into? They came after you guys once. Maybe these WLFs are connected to them.
No, it didn't seem like the same group.
Maybe those black market smugglers back in Boston?
Dina, Joel crossed a lot of people. I don't see the point in guessing.
Okay.
At least until we find out more information.
In the game, they showed up and killed him and didn't really give much away. We also didn't encounter the scars until much later on. Like day 2-ish I want to say, maybe night 2. Seeing them on the outskirts though, that helps to hammer home how much the wolves own Seattle. I do think maybe they should have been introduced first in a more intimidating way because they're very scary in the game. The soldiers you can deal with I think, but it feels way more intense when you're dealing with the scars. Because they're just like whistling about and then get shot in the head. Here though, one's been shot in the back, which clearly shows he was running away. The wolves have been told not to kill anyone who can't defend themselves, so we have a couple of questions here. But look, fog of war is different to plotting out rules in a war room somewhere, and on the field of battle, the battlefield if you will, you know, things get complicated. Or more simple you could say. Ellie also discovers the bullet casings and says they're not Fedra. Seattle was actually run by Fedra at one point, but the wolves overthrew them. Ellie then comes across the girl, hammer in hand. She never stood a chance, and I wonder if her seeing this sort of reminds her of the situations she may have been dragged into by Joel's death. Joel was the one who pulled Ellie into all of this, which this moment could push. They did come across dead kids in season 1, and yeah, it's messed up. Ellie blames Abby for it though, which shows she's so set on revenge, she can't even really grasp reality. She will say anything to justify why she's going after her. She and Abby both lost their father figures at 19, and they're very much reflections of each other. On the podcast, they also talked about how being dead set on pursuing the thing you're after only leads to more loss. So how do you win in this world? Because Ellie is just going to get the same thing Abby did, which is probably unhappiness. The pair then notice a car, which signifies they're close in both the show and game.
Ellie, cars.
Yeah, we're getting close.
We're close now.
This then takes them to the freeway on the outskirts of Seattle.
Sure seems quiet.
It's quiet.
That's my gameplay that again, because I'm a gamer and I couldn't find the clips anywhere, so I had to go play it myself. But I love the game, so give me more game. It feels a lot like Rick entering Atlanta though, and definitely like an homage to The Walking Dead. Coming across a view of the city, you can spot the Space Needle, which is where Manny's at. We also have lots of cranes, and later discover the scars use these to move about the city undetected. Manny gives the clear for the wolves, and it's a far cry from how we saw the scars before. As they travelled with makeshift wheelbarrows, here we see they've got armoured trucks and foot soldiers. But the scars fight on because they have belief. They also mention the FOB, which is where Isaac's plotting things from. It also seems like they're skipping the Federal gates and just jumping to the downtown area. In the game, you reach a massive gate that you have to then scale. In the tower there, we get the first mention of Isaac, which is shown to us in a note. But they're skipping all that, and that wraps up the episode, and before we get into the spoiler section, I have some thoughts. You see kids, I thought last week was the best episode they've ever done, and then this felt like the worst. I know there's lots of worries that the series is going to tank after Joel's death, and I was hoping they were going to come out swinging. Abby style. Unfortunately though, I felt this was dull, drab and drawn out. I think the game did the right thing and just kept things to the minimum and got us to Seattle quickly. We all know where it's going to go, so we don't really need characters sat about talking about whether is she going to go or not. Yeah, we already know. Because like Gail said, we know where she's going. In the game, you just assume all these scenes happen, you don't need them shown to you, and personally, as part of a narrative, I think that works much better. So, I think they could have easily skipped over most of this episode. I think filler is a word that gets overused because sometimes you do need that development. Here though, I'm not sure what it really added to the story, which is a shame because I feel like they could have really hit the ground running. You can still do this doubt, Ellie's anger, and all these things that she goes through in the episode, but do them out on the road or in Seattle like how they do in the game. Like, I'm not sure I needed a town hall meeting with people I'm never going to see again, just for Ellie to ignore it anyway. Either way, I don't know, 3 was a big dip, and it's not because I hate the character pieces like this, because like Bill and Frank didn't really progress the story either, but it also didn't feel like it was wasting your time. The human moments hit there a lot more though, and after last week, I thought we'd avoid doing what so many shows fall fall victim to, which is just have a really dull episode after a big one. I'm also really surprised at what they did with Tommy in that he didn't immediately head out for revenge. Again, it's a massive deviation for the character, and I do hope that he gets more to do in the season, because he's a massive part of the game. Either way though, I am disappointed, especially after how good last week was, in my opinion. It's like the best episode they've ever done, and then yeah, just to follow it up with this, I think there's the worry that, there's going to be a massive audience drop off after Joel's death, and then for them to just basically give everyone a reason to stop watching like this. Yeah, weird way to take it. Either way, let me know your thoughts below, and that takes us into the spoilers section. Heavy spoilers. Spoilers, it's the spoiler section. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is Ellie's PTSD. I did wonder if that scream at the hospital was setting up the Bond scene. Ellie keeps getting flashbacks of Joel's death, and eventually this drives her to go out and hunt Abby. Yes, after Seattle, Ellie fails to kill Abby, and she returns home to live on a farm with Dina. This is alongside her and Jesse's kid. I think that her pregnancy was teased at in the 10, as she said her and Jesse had hooked up again. Also wonder if that's what her vomiting was teasing. In the game, they come across a clicker and a horse, and Dina ends up being sick. Turns out that this is morning sickness, which that moment in the woods might also be alluding to. Anyway, Tommy shows up at the farm and tells Ellie he's found out where Abby is. He's got a messed up leg from what happened in Seattle, which may have been what inspired the conversation with Seth. Tommy can't go with her though, and thus she has to go out alone. As for his time in Seattle, he ends up using a sniper throughout the city. Tommy ends up killing Manny, and I wonder if this Space Needle sniper scene is setting up their showdown. On the map, we also have the Ferris wheel and aquarium, which is where Owen set up his base. At this point though, Abby's at the stadium, which is shown at the bottom of the map. We also have the radio tower there as well, which I'm guessing they might hit next week. That's somewhere the Scars have wiped out the WLF, so I'm wondering if the pair will come across that as well. That would then lead into the massacre, they escape the radio station, run into the subways, get a big chase there, and we know that scene's coming. So that just makes sense to me. Either way though, that's the episode, and I'd of course love to hear your thoughts. Please drop a like on the video and drop a comment with your thoughts below. Did you know that members of the channel, you also get early access to videos every week? If you click the join button, you'll get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month, and as of doing this, we've got Mulholland Drive up there. So if you want Mulholland Drive and early videos every week, you go click the join button. Now if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown on screen right now over whether Abby was right or wrong. Was she right? Was she wrong? Is there even right or wrong in this world? That's what we'll talk about, and huge thank you for sticking through this breakdown. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.